Imagine being a somewhat skinny boy born into a family that are leaders of a religious sect who would do anything to please a goddess they have never seen, and in one of their many rituals, you end up dead, but your life doesn't end after this. Well, this is the story of Yakido Arabe. The anime begins with a bunch of buff dudes in their underwear and bald heads climbing a mountain singing while a storm of water falls, carrying a scrawny young man who has a dead face that will be our protagonist Yakido inside a basket of clothes and shouting Mitama, which is the goddess they worship. Then appears a super buff dark-skinned guy with disco glasses and bald on a cliff where the sea crashes, where he is informed that the successor has arrived, and here we realize that this is the father of our protagonist. The dark-skinned man announces that he will start a ritual where he will have to survive for more than 3 days submerged in what we clearly see is a stormy sea. Our protagonist knows that this ritual will be the last of his life full of dangers. Before being thrown into the sea like a fish, Yukido's father tells him that thanks to Mitama he will be saved, and if he survives, he will consider him whatever he wants, and without thinking, the father throws him into the sea. While our protagonist sinks, he remembers his misfortunes and curses the goddess while asking to be sent to a world where religion does not exist, while remembering the last porn video he watched and did not enjoy. And it seems that our protagonist's wish comes true because when he wakes up, a pink-haired waifu is reviving him with uncommon techniques she is reading in a book. Our waifu, named Alural, who lives in a medieval village, promises Yakito that she will take care of him until he fully recovers and that he can eat at the restaurant where she works whenever he wants. The thing is, our protagonist believes that he is in a magical world like that of video games, but he will be unpleasantly surprised when he realizes that his current life is no better than the previous one. When he is about to start his first task of farming, one of the villagers approaches him saying that all the girls in the village belong to him. It seems he already thinks he owns the harem, and threatens him to stay away from our waifu, but at that moment another villager with purple hair appears to save him. Here we realize that the ladies' man is called Roy and the one with purple hair is Clen. The latter offers our protagonist a job, which again he thinks has to do with the magical world, but the truth is that it has to do with picking grapes. Yakido strives so hard to gain positive attention that he doesn't realize he's picking an amount that can't be sold. However, our protagonist, being a good protagonist, turns these grapes into alcohol for the villagers. Yakido complains that for a month of being revived in another world, he has only done field work and that he was not supposed to do that. Until one day, while he was plowing the land with Roy, an unknown beast appears where the protagonist believed they were going to save him with magic, but this does not happen. This man does not want to accept reality and they end up fleeing. After this event, our protagonist begins to accept that in the new world where he lives, there is no magic or belief in the existence of a god or spirituality. Amidst all these thoughts, the waifu and the Don Juan appear, concerned about where our protagonist was. Then Don Juan approaches him to ask about their friendship and tells him that he would help him look for a forbidden text, which ultimately turns out to be an erotic book. Our protagonist is accompanied by our pink-haired waifu and Don Juan to explore the Imperial City, where he realizes that the people of the city hate those from his village. During the tour, they find an old house where the forbidden text is kept. Our protagonist tells his friends that this book could be found in museums, and they are very surprised, saying that the country our protagonist comes from is a very advanced place. The anime takes a dark turn when our protagonist realizes that in the main square of the capital, some men accompanied by soldiers die after drinking a liquid. At that moment, our waifu rushes him away and confesses that the country they live in has a system for citizens to end their lives when ordered. This makes Yakido worry about the lives of his friends, but Roy reassures him, saying that they are special and that will never happen to them. During the night, our pink-haired waifu sneaks into our protagonist's room, trying to recreate all the sadomasochistic scenes from the book. Here we realize that our waifu is addicted to the delicious. That same night, the waifu confesses to the protagonist that they are part of an isolation camp and that is why the people of the city hate them. They are sent to the village because they fear death or do not comply with the empire's rules. The waifu also tells him that the village has been happy since Yakido arrived because he does not judge them. Our protagonist tells them that he also appreciates them because they are the first friends he has. However, the plot takes a chilling turn when Yakido finds his friend Roy beaten in front of the restaurant in the morning. He confesses that the government has taken Alural and his sister to kill them. Then the friend with purple hair appears in a carriage to rescue the two sisters who are in the capital, but on the way, the anime shows us that our waifu's older sister has already been hanged. But before they kill our waifu, our protagonist appears and fights off all the guards to save her. However, the person leading the murders, named Commander Bertrand, emerges from the shadows, attacking our protagonist severely and killing the waifu after telling them that dying is a duty that all citizens of the Empire have. Before dying, Yakido prays to Mitama, asking her to save him and his friends. She descends from the heavens, emerges emerging from the sun in the form of a girl to the earth and begins to purge the soldiers who harmed her poor Yakido. Then the goddess revives the protagonist and all the people who had been sacrificed, like our waifu and her sister. Chapter 2. Upon returning to the village, everyone decides to celebrate the great return of our protagonist and his friends with a party. Meanwhile, the sisters are trying to dress the goddess so she doesn't come down naked, while the waifu presents her first scene of jealousy because of the attention the goddess gives to Yakido. However, Mitama, to reassure our waifu, tells her that she appreciates how much she loves Yakido. Meanwhile, our protagonist asks his friend Klen about why the emperor orders the suicide of his citizens, and he replies that it is a rule that was installed in the country many years ago by the emperor and the parliament. The conversation is interrupted by a torpedo named Mitama. The surprise is that the ladies' man falls in love with our goddess and is rejected. This makes the ladies' man have a perverted moment that disgusts all the friends who were at the restaurant at that time. While all our protagonist's friends punish the ladies' man for his attitude, he asks the goddess if she has the power to destroy the army of a country. She says that it is possible. I can destroy it with a great wave. At that moment, our goddess prepares to demonstrate her great power. However, she only makes the glass of alcohol spill. This disappoints our protagonist and worries our goddess, who goes to check how many believers she has in the world, which are 0. Not even Yakido is a believer. It is important to mention that the number of believers is what gives a god greater power. The problem arises when the empire begins to investigate everything that happened during the rescue. The villagers worry about what will happen, but the ladies' man says that our protagonist will solve everything. Yakido ended up in a world where he also has no good luck, although he already has 2 waifus. Our protagonist, worried, goes to the Sento to think about how to solve the problem with the empire, until Mitama interrupts in the middle of the bath being thrown into the air by Yakido. Yakido tells the goddess that he is worried about what will happen to the village in the future. She proposes that they escape, since she has seen how much he has strived since his previous life. Our protagonist refuses this idea, saying that he has always been running away like a coward from the situations that life has put him in. Therefore, in the bathroom and naked, he tells Mitama that he is going to create a religion around her in this world. It seems that ideas always come in the bathroom or in the shower. While our protagonist and the goddess are talking to Don Juan to join the religion, he imagines himself in a sadomasochistic scene with Mitama, where he is the submissive to our goddess and is swearing to be her main believer. When he returns to reality, Roy accepts to be a believer. After this, the 3 start planning how they will bring more people so that Mitama can gain enough power to defeat the empire's army. The goddess offers to attract followers. However, her speech only enrages our protagonist. For this reason, Yakido begins to put into practice everything his father taught him when he was going to be the future leader of the sect. Yes, the well-built dark-skinned guy who appeared at the beginning. He started by setting up an altar for the goddess, and where he talked about the miracles she would do and had done. To demonstrate that Mitama performed miracles, the protagonist used the poor pink-haired waifu telling her that she had love problems and that information had been given to him by the goddess. The truth is that he only guessed without realizing that the waifu is in love with him. This plan, like others, went down the drain because of the idiocy of our goddess and Don Juan. However, the opportunity to demonstrate Mitama's miracle came when the sister's pet became deathly ill and they had no way to treat it. Late at night, the protagonist along with the goddess gave it medicine that didn't work and ended up with the animal's death. Seeing this, the goddess decides to bring the pet back to life, putting her own existence at risk. Thanks to the miracle performed by Mitama, the 2 sisters become believers in the religion, which helps her gain more strength, but not enough. After this, the pink-haired waifu asks the goddess for one last favor, which is to bring back to life those soldiers she killed when she saved the protagonist and brought them back to life. Here we realize that the villain who killed Yakido is named Bertrand, and that she was a woman who had hidden her true gender while she was a commander, another waifu added to our beloved protagonist's harem. Chapter 3. After being revived, Bertrand tries to return to the capital city to give information to the emperor and parliament, but the waifu cannot enter because Commander Bertrand was known to be a man and not a woman. The city gate guard ends up kicking her out, telling her she is an imposter and not to tarnish the name of the commander. Unable to enter, our waifu has to stay in the forest, where she encounters the ladies' man who, with his dirty deeds, tries to touch her and scares her, but our protagonist arrives to send him flying and save her. Yakido tells the waifu to forget about the empire since they discarded her like garbage and asks her to join his forces, offering her a place where she can sleep and be comfortable. Bertrand agrees, and she begins to help the village with her sword by killing the beasts. Our protagonist takes advantage of this to attract more followers to the religion of Mitama. This helps increase the believers, giving more power to the goddess. Seeing that they are gaining more followers, Yakido seeks to ensure that the new religion is not based on devotion but on the personal benefit of each of the followers. This protagonist begins begins to resemble the evil king or a demon king. At that moment, Bertrand appears and the protagonist asks her, how many soldiers does the emperor have? But he clarifies to the waifu that it is not to attack the emperor but to protect the village from a future attack. Things get serious when the waifu tells Yukito that the strength of the empire lies not in the number of its soldiers but in an elite force with special powers given by the emperor himself, who would have the strength to destroy entire mountains. Elsewhere in the country, Adder is training part of the army's elite, saying that he already has plans to destroy the village for breaking the empire's rules. Adder seems to have unimaginable strength as he is able to defeat monsters and destroy mountains. It seems that all the waifus in this world who are associated with the protagonist have sexual fantasies about him, but he himself doesn't realize it. The idiot doesn't realize that he's building his own harem like every protagonist. However, Yukito's approach to the commander waifu has nothing to do with the sexual part, but rather he wanted to ask her about the strength of her sword. Bertrand tells him that her sword has the power to cut through anything and was given by the emperor. Our hero/protagonist meets with Clen and the sister of our pink-haired waifu to discuss an upcoming attack by the empire on the village, and that's when he learns that there are more villages of people who are rejected. The sister tells our protagonist that these villages serve to protect the capital, and she also tells him that each village seems to have about 2,000 people who would help achieve the number of believers needed to overthrow the emperor. On the other hand, we meet Loki, who seems to be the commander of the elite force and who tries to delay the attack on the village, assigning Adder the task of continuing to kill monsters as they have become a problem that could affect the capital in the future. Although we still don't know if she's a waifu or not. While our protagonist thinks about how to gather so many followers, he has a memory of his father giving him advice, advising him to conquer the different territories, which in this case would be to conquer each village, reducing the empire's power. Our warrior waifu has her first encounter with Adder, who is part of the Archon of the capital. Adder realizes that Bertrand is a former commander of the Imperial Army and seeks to destroy her for joining the village's religion, where our waifu is defeated and is going to be taken to the capital. But Adder stops her path upon seeing the progress that the village where the protagonist and his friends live is making. Chapter 4. On the other hand, our protagonist claims to have found a way to gain 10,000 followers, and that way is by using Mitama's power for the benefit of those who decide to believe in her, as they will have an incentive to follow her. With this in mind, they acquired a tractor and began mowing the grass, telling all the villagers that this tractor is a creation of Mitama and that those who follow her will be able to use it. So well, the tricky protagonist managed to gain the loyalty of the village peasants. However, he says that with 1,000 followers it is not enough, so he is thinking of going to another population. Then, the pink-haired girl enters, dropping a bucket of water, giving the protagonist an idea to get more followers, which is to install pipes and faucets in the population with the same blackmail that only those who follow Mitama will get them. Well, in the end, they installed pipes throughout the village, even creating a pool, which Mitama is not very happy about as she had to install many pipes and is exhausted because of it. But well, after a while, she has regained her energy and we see that they now have 1650 followers, which clearly helps the goddess a lot as the more followers she has, the more powerful she becomes. But the protagonist says that 1650 is not enough, so now he has decided to create an exclusive club where he puts the sisters to dance and only the followers will have access. So this idea is quite strange and far from religious standards, but well, at least Roy loves the idea even though the waifus beat him up. But that's not all, folks. The protagonist also brought electricity to the village, on the condition that they follow the goddess Mitama. While they admire the electricity from a mountain, we learn that Clen is originally from the palace, and there, as he takes off his clothes, Bertrand realizes that Clen does not have the mark placed on the exiles, which is quite suspicious that someone from the palace who has not been exiled is living in that village by their own will, but well, as long as Clen doesn't go crazy, we'll tolerate him in the village. Later on, we see that the number of followers exceeds 2,000, but then Roy arrives terrified to report that a girl is beating up Bertrand, and well, folks, changing the scene, we see that this girl is none other than Adder. As we know, Adder has the order to destroy the village, and the reason he tortures Bertrand is so that she will give him information about it. But then, the goddess appears in defense of Bertrand. A little later, the protagonist arrives, but it's the goddess who will fight against Adder. So, well, since Mitama now has more than 2,000 followers, she has good powers and summons some little soldiers shaped like vegetables with which she seriously troubles Adder. However, Adder began invoking her forbidden tricks to counterattack. The goddess did something similar, and here everything is decided, folks, with Adder ultimately emerging as the victor, because let's remember that Adder is very powerful. This left the goddess feeling really down as she says she has disappointed the protagonist. Then, a while later, the hot sisters arrive with Roy, who honestly isn't very helpful painful, but well, there's no other choice but to endure his morbidity towards Adder, who by the way, is quite upset because she had to expend a lot of energy. So she invoked a power to finish off the village once and for all. Seeing this, the protagonist laments, saying that he let many people die again, but suddenly we see that despite the impact, the village is returning to normality, and then Klen appears, who is responsible for restoring the village. He tells Adder that it's enough, and well, he reveals his true identity. Turns out Klen is actually Loki, one of the main archons of the palace just like Adder, and well, his main mission was to spy on the village, but since they treated him so well there, he decided to switch sides. Now he's on the protagonist's side and says he'll help him overthrow the Emperor. Chapter 5. Upon hearing this, Adder feels outraged by Loki's betrayal, but Loki doesn't care at all, so he stabs Adder, captures Bertrand, and leaves with the protagonist and the goddess to the palace. There we meet the Emperor, but nothing. Folks, the image of the Emperor is an illusion because when the goddess discovers the trick, the palace is shown as it really is, and well, the Emperor is actually dead. What's sitting there is a corpse. And well, there Loki explains that the Emperor died years ago, but after his death, the illusion was created to keep the population captive, and who currently governs actually are the machines of the place. Yes, folks, we thought this world was backward, but those machines are more advanced than those of our time, as they control the army, the assembly, and basically all the power groups. However, Loki says that he wants to destroy the machines to build a new world. But then, the protagonist gets violent and interrogates Loki with a knife to his throat, asking him what his reason is for destroying that world and building a new one, as the protagonist distrusts Loki's motivations. To this, Loki tells him that he simply got fed up with how things are in the Empire and wants to change them, but the protagonist doesn't buy that story and asks him to tell the truth. But nothing, folks, Loki is telling the truth, as in a flashback, we see that he didn't agree with the way the Empire was being governed, so he decided to infiltrate the isolation villages. There he realized that people in the village lived better, life was quieter, and there were no abuses. The only difference is that now, by destroying the machines, Loki wants to become a deity as well, and well, the protagonist disagrees with this, but since they both want to get rid of the abuses of the Empire, they decide to destroy the machines, but now the protagonist will compete to make people recognize Mitama as the true goddess, and not Loki, nor any of the Accordies. Chapter 6. After this, everyone went to celebrate the fall of the Empire, and the celebration includes Loki, whom the protagonist views with some disdain because they are now competitors. But well, Loki says he wants to say goodbye to his friends, and that's how after spending some time together, he bids farewell, saying that he will do everything possible to become the goddess of the new world. Meanwhile, Adder stays at the bar and is quite depressed because she didn't like that the Empire was destroyed, but well, the protagonist cheers her up by saying that he will make her part of his team to defeat Loki. As part of the deal, the protagonist presents her as the second goddess of the village, even giving her half of Mitama's followers. Obviously, Mitama didn't like this much, but well, the protagonist knows that Adder is powerful, so he wants to have her on his side. Having formed a group, Adder deals with the beasts, Mitama performs miracles, and in this way, the protagonist extends the influence of his goddesses to other villages. Even Adder now has more than 3,000 followers, and Mitama, who was originally supposed to have more, has slightly fewer than 3,000. Mitama is obviously jealous, but Adder says that she has more because she saves people from the beasts. Then, the protagonist receives information that someone named Dakini has recruited 10,000 followers for another religion. The protagonist doesn't know if that religion is Loki's, but he will investigate it. To do this, he gathers his friends and tells them to infiltrate Dakini's religion to see who she is. But first, he clarifies that according to his investigations, Dakini's religion is based on doing dirty things. So well, the sister of the pink-haired girl decided not to go, but the protagonist, the pink-haired girl, the goddess, and Roy did go. Because you know those three are quite hot, especially Roy. That's how they go to the supposed church of the religion, which actually looks like a club from the outside, but there they meet two followers who introduce them to Rish, the assistant director of the religion. She then leads the protagonist and his group through the church until a point where she tells them that she will introduce them to Dakini, but warns them that they must do it as couples. So well, the protagonist enters with the pink-haired girl, and there they meet Dakini, who welcomes them to the cult and casts a spell on them that makes the protagonist and the pink-haired girl very horny. And well, as Roy was in another room with the goddess, she gave Roy a good smack to calm him down, so he interrupted the heat of the protagonist and the pink-haired girl. Later, they meet Rish, who indeed cannot control her desires, so she asks the protagonist for help to suppress her urges to do the deed. Chapter 7. On the other hand, we learn that Bertrand has switched sides to Loki's camp, and now between the two, they are trying to grow their religion. The truth is that Loki is the one in charge there, Bertrand simply obeys. Returning to the den, I mean Dakini's church, we see her subjugating some followers, among whom is Roy, who really doesn't need to be subjugated, as he is quite submissive by nature. Meanwhile, the protagonist interrogates Riche to see if she is truly repentant for belonging to Dakini's sect or if it's all a ruse to infiltrate their cult and steal followers from their goddesses. But well, it does seem that Riche is repentant, so the protagonist finally decides to accept her as an ally in his religion. In the meantime, we see that the number of Mitama's believers is dwindling rapidly, and well, that's because misfortunes are happening in the village, and as people notice that their goddess isn't saving them, they are stopping believing in her, and instead, they are believing in Adder, who is the only one helping them solve the community's problems. Back at the church, we see that the protagonist has already accepted Riche into his team. The problem is that they don't know how to leave the church without Dakini's permission, so the four of them are locked up and now they are looking for a way out. To do this, they plan for Riche to use her influence as the vice director of the religion and try to overthrow Dakini as the leader of the movement, and that's what they started to do. They used some of the few powers left to Mitama, thus performing some miracles with which they managed to convince some followers that Riche can perform miracles. So well, in this way, she managed to take followers away from Dakini, who, suspecting the plan since she was losing followers, went to ask Riche if she is seeking to overthrow her, but no, Riche denied it. It's true that she wants to usurp her position, but she's not just going to admit it like that. However, Dakini is not foolish, and despite Riche's denial, she still discovered the plan, so she ordered to punish Riche along with the protagonist and his people. It turns out that among the followers who were going to impose the punishment was none other than Roy. He is still enchanted by Dakini's love effects, so he is following her orders, the traitor. And it makes sense, he is shown from the beginning that skirts are above all else. So they take the four rebels to a public trial, and instead of prosecuting his companions, Roy tried to flirt with some of his former companions. It was Dakini herself who started questioning Riche, threatening to cut her head off, asking why she decided to betray her. Faced with the situation, Riche started crying and showed remorse, asking Dakini for another chance. These tears managed to move the entire cult, who begged Dakini not to execute Riche. And all this drama turns out to be part of the protagonist's plan to take followers away from Dakini. He knew that sooner or later Dakini would discover them and publicly judge them, so he instructed Riche himself to cry and say what she's saying, all with the intention of making the cult abandon Dakini and stay with Riche. And well, he's succeeding. Now Dakini sees how people are not supporting her, and instead, they are showing sympathy towards Riche. And of course, there she realizes that the whole plan is the protagonist's doing because Loki had warned her that a human would eventually come to dispute her followers. So well, in the end, she decided not to execute them, but she ordered them to be locked up in a dungeon where the one in charge of watching over them is none other than the traitor Roy, who insists on following Dakini because she treated him with love. The truth is, all she did was teach him how to touch himself. But well, after leaving their former companions alone in the cell, the protagonist begins to think of a way to escape. The most logical thing would be to use Mitama's powers, but since she hardly has any followers left, she's practically dying, so asking her to use her power is not an option. At that moment, muscular guys with masks arrive at the cell, known as the Purgers, who are responsible for the dirty work in the cult. Chapter 16. But just when the Purgers were about to beat up the protagonist and the waifus, Adder appeared from behind, accompanied by the pink-haired sister, to save the day. And well, Adder is quite broken now. She already has over 6,000 followers, and of course, when the dying Mitama sees this, she feels a lot of envy. Chapter 17. But there is no time for envy because the threat still persists, as we see several Purgers who are still alive and seek to execute what Dakini ordered, which is to kill the protagonist and the rest of the waifus. Adder sent them her blows, but one of them managed to dodge the attack and grabbed Riche by the gown, knocking her down, and when he was about to strike her, the pink-haired one intervened to save her. After this, they continued to flee from the dungeon, and in that moment, the protagonist tells Mitama that the reason she lost followers is because she was absent from the village, and well, the followers who left her joined Adder. That's why Adder is so strong now and she's dying instead. But well, when Mitama finds out that the protagonist knew that was going to happen, she asks him why he did it, to which the protagonist tells her that since Adder is stronger than her in combat, it was convenient to give Adder the most possible followers, because only then could they defeat Dakini's sect. And it's there, when they are about to leave the church, when they come across Dakini herself, who is upset about the mess they have caused in her temple, so now she seeks to take revenge personally. But then she is impacted by a tremendous power which was launched by Adder. They're being defeated. Dakini thought it was a good idea to start mocking Adder, and of course, Adder invoked a power with which she made Dakini quite concerned, but they're also. Adder clarified that she will not kill her, but she will make her obey some orders in favor of the group. And well, Dakini didn't like the idea of becoming some sort of slave at all, who tells Adder that she is just a newcomer, so she won't follow her. Chapter 18. And after saying this, she invoked a power with which she began to occupy the minds of everyone present. We know that Dakini's power is to do do dirty things, so now with this power of occupying minds, what she seeks is to make sure that no one can contain their desires to do dirty things. That's why we see the pink-haired girl along with the sister trying to take possession of the protagonist's body, and well, the protagonist tries to make the waifu stop, but the truth is that there comes a moment when he too is succumbing to his dirtiest instincts. And when it seems like they're about to make the trio happen, some tentacles appear to separate them. And yes, this time it's Mitama who has managed to regain her powers thanks to Risha's followers who are now following her too, and well, being there, she starts telling Dakini's followers that she will give them little pills and other things to improve their love lives. So with this, she managed to take some followers away from Dakini herself. Although Dakini says that with the few followers she took away, it won't change anything. That's why she seeks to use one of her abilities to attack Mitama. The problem is that this ability did not activate, and on the other hand, Mitama was able to perform her power with which she began to free the possessed from their bonds. Chapter 19. With this, Dakini began to ask Mitama what on earth she did, and there in the conversation, Mitama told Dakini that she was a false goddess because Mitama considers herself to be the one and only true goddess. And although Dakini doesn't believe much of what Mitama is saying, upon realizing Mitama's true power, she preferred to escape. There she left Roy in charge, who apparently offered to cover for her, but no, it turns out the traitor betrayed Dakini again and claims to have returned to the protagonist's side. After reading the note that he left when they were in the dungeon, he claims to have been convinced to switch sides. The truth is, this guy's changes of allegiance are quite convenient. I'm not convinced by his loyalties, but well, the fact is that Roy is holding Dakini's escape, and this was seized by Adder to give her a good beating. With her on the ground, the good guys begin to give her the respective sermon, but Dakini says she has not yet been defeated, although the truth is, she has. The poor thing has no energy or strength to get up anymore, and besides, Rish appeared to confront her about some past situations, such as the fact that her mother and she used to be very good friends, and yet Dakini betrayed them, so by touching this chord of Dakini's past, she ends up surrendering and apologizing to Rish for being mean to her and her mother. Chapter 20. After this, they took Dakini to the dungeon where they tied her up in a dirty way, and of course, Roy was tempted to do dirty things with her, but in the end, they managed to stop him by force, as the protagonist's plans are not to do dirty things with Dakini. What he wants is for Dakini to ask all her followers to follow Mitama from that moment on. But no, Dakini says she won't do it, so the protagonist decides to leave her locked up for 24 hours so she can think better, and if after that time she still doesn't want to do what they asked, Yakido says they'll get rid of her, meaning they'll kill her. And at that moment, when the protagonist left, Rish enters the room to tell Dakini that despite what happened in the past, she doesn't hold a grudge against her. In fact, she says she wants them to be friends again, so she will convince the protagonist not to do anything bad to her. So the next day, we see Rish arriving with the protagonist in tow and tells Dakini that she managed to dominate him, so the protagonist won't kill her anymore. There, she also proposes to Dakini to restore the cult and make things go back to how they were before, but of course, Rish wants Dakini to hand over her percentage of the followers since she says the cult is divided. So in exchange for saving her, Rish wants to keep the followers, and well, it's clear that this is another of the protagonist's plans, as we see him planning a way to take Dakini's followers away in a memory. That's when they came up with the idea to pretend that Rish had betrayed him, but Rish said that Dakini is not stupid and she wouldn't believe the betrayal unless they gave her a good demonstration, so that's why they put the shirtless protagonist to crawl. In the end, the strategy worked. Rish and Dakini made amends and restored the cult, but with the condition that the followers passed into Dakini's hands. And thanks to this, we see that Mitama has gained many more followers. She has already exceeded 10,000. And this is because even though the followers now belong to Rish, Rish acknowledges Mitama as her goddess, so Rish's followers are also Mitama's followers. By the way, Rish is no longer with the protagonist and his waifus as she stayed in the cult, so we don't see her aboard the cart where the protagonist and his girls are heading back to the village. Then we see that the little goddess didn't miss the opportunity to taunt Adder about her number of followers. That's how on the way to the village, they encounter a monster, and well, Mitama wants to take the opportunity to show off her abilities now that she has more than 10,000 followers. But no folks, in the end, Adder got ahead, who turns out to have more than 11,000 believers. It's not clear how Adder managed to get so many followers, but the fact is that she herself says she's broken, and to prove whether what she's saying is true or just bragging, the story presents her with a test to prove it, as about 5,000 monsters are coming. Chapter 21. Seeing them, Adder's expression changes a bit because even though they got rid of the beasts, there were still corpses along the way, so there was a risk that the cart they were traveling in could overturn. But to prevent this, we have Mitama, who with one of her spells managed to flatten the road and prevent derailment. And of course, Mitama, in her boastful manner, didn't hesitate to make Adder see that they survived thanks to her, and well, Adder Adder acknowledges it and thanks her. Then we see that the protagonist is quite serious because regardless of whether they were able to get rid of the beasts, he knows that the beasts came from the village, and yes, when they arrive at the village, they find everything in ruins. Fortunately, the inhabitants managed to survive, applying an escape plan they had planned in case of an attack, and the goddesses were not present. The problem is that the plan was to protect the people, not the infrastructure, so we see that all the buildings are destroyed, and when I say all, I mean all of them. And although at first the waifus are sad, they later realize that as long as they are alive, they can solve anything. So well, that cheered them up even more because they know they have the goddess who is capable of restoring anything if she sets her mind to it, and there. The protagonist asked Mitama to please restore the village to how it was before the beasts passed through, because now that Mitama has more than 10,000 followers, she could do it. And the truth is that she can do it, but the waifu says she doesn't want it because it would use up a lot of power and she would feel weak again, so the idea of restoring the village doesn't appeal to her. Then, Adder appears to plead with her to please restore the village, and the protagonist joins in the plea, and well, since Mitama likes to be begged, in the end, she did decide to restore the darn village. I don't know why so much fuss if in the end she knew she was going to end up restoring the village. But hey, folks, the goddess responsible for destroying the village is still around, and seeing that she is fixing the mess she caused, she orders her beasts to go for revenge. This goddess is called Gaia, and with only 2 believers, she is capable of summoning beasts capable of destroying a village. What will happen when she gets more followers? But folks, to find out, we'll have to wait for a second part of the summary, which if you want me to bring, leave me a comment with the word goddess, and with that, I'll get to work.